This is the second PowerPoint presentation for World Geography, Week 2. Here are the learning objectives for Chapter 2 of the textbook. And we note that physical geography is a focus of this chapter, and also issues of physical geography such as the world is a restless place geologically. And indeed, we were reminded once again recently in Napa, California, that region with its earthquake, the horrific earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan only a few years ago, and Japan and Napa, California being located on that great arc around the Pacific Ocean known as the Ring of Fire. And we're going to look at a few of these features in this chapter: earthquakes and volcanoes. It all begins with plate tectonics, that is the dynamics of the various plates of the Earth's crust moving either away from each other or against each other in some form. This is ultimately caused by the convection cells within the Earth. Here's an interesting map showing the various plates of the Earth. Please note that while the plates are associated with continents, it's not just the continent that's exposed above the water, but areas over the plate covered by water, oceans. It's these regions that especially are the places where volcanoes and earthquakes can occur. Here is California's own famous San Andreas Fault Zone. It is a transform fault, and page 54 helps define that. Actually, it's the meeting of the Pacific Plate with the North American Plate, and they're kind of rubbing side to side rather than a direct colliding impact against each other. Your book does note, though, that some are now theorizing that the actual location of where the two plates meet is further east from this area of the San Andreas Fault, kind of on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada. Interesting. The first map is a map of where frequently earthquakes and volcanic action occurs. And the second map is a map that shows where the various plates of the Earth meet. And of course, the conclusion to be drawn is that volcanic and earthquake events occur generally where there are plates meeting. The next few slides show pictures of more recent disasters. This first slide shows the results of the 2011 earthquake off the coast of Japan and the ensuing now we move away from tidal plate wave or tsunami that did such horrific emphasis on earthquakes damage and volcanoes
and
death to climate. On the next slide, you have the number one influence on Earth's climate is the sun, earthquake, and the solar energy, and Mount Pinatubo. Then the Philippines, its eruption latitude, and finally is important. The recent volcanic action climate will be like land and water interaction, which global pressure systems, disastrous as global wind patterns, and the shape of the land. Also, Earth upheavals have an impact on climate. Indeed, much of weather and climate involves temperature and pressure differences. The ability of This is a nice illustration of the greenhouse effect, where the sun's energy passes through the atmosphere, and not all of it, of course, and then some remains near the Earth as because it's long wave in its nature. As it says here, long wave infrared radiation is re-radiated from Earth's surface. This infrared radiation is absorbed by greenhouse gases in the lower atmosphere, and that's what keeps the Earth warm. Of course, as humans keep adding to the amount of greenhouse gases, the Earth is getting warmer. This greenhouse kind of effect, where long wave radiation is retained and heats the Earth's atmosphere, I think is analogous to what in fact happens with our own cars with the windows up. Some of the radiation escapes the car, but longer wave radiation remains and heats up the interior of the car. Climate differs from latitude to latitude. Depending on the latitude, such as the tropics, winds and ocean currents play a part in the movement of heat and moisture, including the creation and movement of, let's say, hurricanes. This is all to say that global pressure systems are responsible for wind and storm systems, and these are often related to latitude. This slide looks at the differences in heat, or the dynamics of heat, between land and water. While looking into this, I noticed some important, rather recent work on atmospheric rivers, and that movement of moisture onto land often occurs within certain places. So I've given a link there to this, certainly what was new to me, phenomenon. As a rule, wind is the movement of air from high pressure to low pressure. At the global level, winds tend to follow certain patterns. And you can see from this, where we're at in California, the arrow is kind of pointing in a clockwise direction. And indeed, here in Southern California, the prevailing winds are winds that come from the direction of the ocean inland. Every once in a while, we get a real difference with that, called the Santa Ana wind conditions, where the movement of air is more from the interior toward the coast. In Southern California, especially here in the Riverside area, we witness the orographic effect quite often. If you can imagine using this picture, the ocean off the coast of Los Angeles and Orange County to the left, and then the prevailing winds bringing in moist ocean air that, as it rises at the various mountain ranges around here, let's say including the San Bernardino Mountains, it cools, and that's where we have the creation of those clouds and the rain that occurs. On the other side of the mountain tends to be very dry, as so much of the moisture was precipitated on the western side. Indeed, if you go up to the Sierra Nevada, when you go up through the Owens Valley and you want to go to Yosemite, so you head up the Tioga Pass is extremely dry and rocky looking. Once you get to the top and head into Yosemite proper, it becomes more and more lush. And the western side of the Sierra Nevada from Yosemite is covered with trees. This slide looks at the important topic of global climate change. Anthropogenic means human-made. So human-made causes are thought to contribute to global warming. There should be some rising in sea levels due to this, since ice is melting at the poles. Major greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, which is the biggest contributor to global warming. I note here that it was a very warm July in the northern hemisphere. If you click on that, you'll be led to a map that will indicate just what was going on in July, temperature-wise. This slide notes the fossil fuel use of the world. Who has the reserves, who is producing oil and coal and natural gas, and then who is consuming it, at least the largest consumers. An important chart when contemplating future human existence, even in one's own life. Fracking is a fairly new mining technique for reaching fairly difficult oil and natural gas deposits, and it's become popular in the U.S., in the Midwest, and in Southwest Pennsylvania, parts of West Virginia, and in fact, certainly in Southwest Pennsylvania, in just a few years, a number of new millionaires have arisen because people held on to their family lands, and now they have drilling equipment on them, and they are collecting royalties. Today, in order to get away from the use of fossil fuels, we are seeking new energy sources, especially those that are renewable. Renewable energy sources include water, solar energy, and wind. But only about 3% of the world's energy use is via renewable energy. Interestingly, the U.S. is up to 13% of its energy use is as renewable, and Germany is at 20%. Moving away from energy to water, fresh water is a scarce and extremely necessary resource for human existence. Though the Earth is a water planet, fresh water makes up a very, very tiny portion of the water available on Earth. And as population increases and climate change occurs, water stress is developing. It is important to note that 70% of freshwater use goes to agriculture. We cannot sustain large populations without a super large agricultural industry, but it requires a lot of water to do so. The next two slides note our own area's significant water stress, namely the water stress we're encountering here in California. This first slide will take you to a January news story, and also will help to note that it's not just California's problem. Arizona, Nevada and others are also involved in this water stress environment. And then the next slide is a much more recent article, and looking at Lake Oroville there, we are aware of just how bad it is in Northern California. We often associate water stress with Southern California, but Northern California as well is suffering. And of course, places that rely on that water are suffering as well. Not only is access to fresh water important to human existence, but also keeping that fresh water pure for human use is also important. Indeed, there is the UN report with the staggering figure that 4,000 children die each day from unsanitary water. We now move into the issue of bioregions and biodiversity. The Earth has an incredible biodiversity, that is, a variety of plants and animals, from Greek bios, life, and the Earth can be divided up into certain bioregions. If you go to the next slide, the book especially focuses on the tropical rainforests, as more than half of the world's animal and plant species can be found in this rather small 7% of the world's land area. Indeed, if you go two more slides, it is noted the large-scale deforestation that's occurring, especially in the Amazon region, but also in Southeast Asia. The release of the greenhouse gas CO2 into the atmosphere, the book noting perhaps up to 20% of human contribution to the greenhouse gases is from the deforestation of the tropical forests. And the reason for this deforestation is for not only timber, but also the demand for beef, the globalized changing diet that's going on. And I have the video link on this topic provided here. In the new edition of the textbook, The Green Revolution is actually covered in Chapter 12 under South Asia, and so we won't focus on the Green Revolution at this time.